well. You can see it. All right, so I'll share my screen here in a minute. Let's wait. On. And if we hit capacity, Colin, I think I can live stream it to Facebook as well. I can just share my whole desktop that way. Thanks for tuning into the meeting. We had about 100 people tuned in, so good.
I think I'm about to get off here.
All righty. We'll go ahead and get started. So, how's everybody doing? Can y'all hear me okay? We'll just wait. Yeah, there you go. Just for the sake of is this audio a little better? Is it easier or less echoey here?
I hear you.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, if for some reason y'all can't hear me, let me know. But hopefully these little earbuds will make a difference. So, all right. So I will share my screen and show you what this thing is all about. So basically, my
Hey, I'm looking through this email that Ed's a while to respond.
Hey guys, just a heads up, if you're talking, you're probably not on mute. So I don't know, there's a way to mute everybody, but I'm not sure how to do it. I should have learned that beforehand. I thought it was just a...
I can't do it. Mm-hmm.
Mute all, there we go. Perfect. All right, I think I'm the only one that's unmuted. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen? Good. So, all right, so here's what we've got. So I've got my screen shared. So ultimately, I'm going to show you a little bit about what this is. This is a tool that I made with the help of a couple other people a few years ago. If you've been through Ninja, you've seen it's called a Focus First software, and I subscribe to that. I've used that for a while, but the challenge with it, there were two challenges. One, it didn't work really well on a Mac, and secondly, you had to have it on your computer in order to use it. And so you had to have this like software platform on your computer. So it wasn't web-based. So I wanted to try to do something similar and create a way that you could make some cool data and interpret ultimately a lot of RealTrax data in a quick snapshot way. And so to do that, I took some of the ideas. I was inspired by some of the things that Focus First software did, but basically just created kind of an Excel sheet on steroids that lives on the cloud on Google, in Google Sheets, and it's something that you can use. And I'll share the link on how to do this afterwards, but I want to show you, kind of walk you through what it is, and then I'll show you how to do it. And then this will be recorded as well, so that you can reference it and fast forward and rewind or whatever, and be able to see how to do it. So ultimately, you'll get a link here And again, I'll show you how to do it in a minute, but I want to go through kind of the basics of what this is. So what I've done is I've taken a RealTracks search right here, and we're just going to go into RealTracks because that's what everybody's familiar with, right? So I've got a search for a client, and this is my own neighborhood. And so let's say I was doing a real estate review for, one of my neighbors. A real estate review really is an opportunity to get everybody. Tell you what, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just a second, so I'm not distracted by that. So a real estate review ultimately is just a way to touch base with your clients, right? So, or past clients or network. If you have a financial advisor, they probably give you some sort of a real estate or a financial review once a year. Here's what the market's doing. Here's what your portfolio looks like. The biggest challenge that the biggest trap that people get caught into is by thinking that it's about running comps. It's not at all about running comps. And it's really about doing something quick and efficient and sending it out and moving on. It's a valuable touch point. If you can do it in person, great, all the better. That's really where the value is. It's a good excuse for a face-to-face, or at least a good excuse for a phone call. So you don't have to do it this way. This is just one way to do a real estate review. You could also just print a report and run a CMA, or just print a list of every property that's sold in their neighborhood in the last 12 months and mail it to them or drop it off on their doorstep. It's really no different. This is just something that is a tool that gives you a little bit of a better way to, more valuable way to use it. You can also use it for comps. And Lee Fund and Andrew Woodard are on this call as well. Lee and Andrew, I'm going to unmute you both. Do you have I'm going to try to unmute you both. I think I lost control somehow. Or maybe there you go. What would you all say is the value of this tool, and how do you use it?
Andrew, you want to go first?
I always hate talking over people on these calls. I use it, I break it off into months instead of trying to bite off the whole year. And for me, it is a value add, just like you were saying, Zach, to my clients, just to touch base with them, let them know what's happening in their area. So I have a real estate review calendar, and every month, that client who bought their home from me that month is on that month's real estate review checklist. If they did not buy their home from me, but they're still just a client that I'm either trying to get, or they've sold their house with me and maybe they did a FSBO, I don't know, just other circumstances, I look up in the tax records when they bought their home, and I use their anniversary dates as that real estate review checklist timeline. They, again, they're not comps. They are a way to touch back in with your client. I do not send it to my entire database. I only send it to my rolling top 50. So every month I'm probably doing, for any given month, probably 8 to 15 of them. And then I hand deliver them with a gift on their front door. I do not knock. I do not ring the doorbell. I don't want to see them. This is not a face-to-face for me. This is a, here's something nice. Here's something sweet for you, maybe a mom in the fall, and here's some data. So I'm touching both the art and the science brain. That's kind of my short spiel.
Awesome. That's great. So mums and graphs.
Mums and graphs.
I have a little tracker too, like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, that after every closing, once I get my commission check, and you're like seeing all the things, I put their address in, if they had PMI when they purchased, and then I have a list of, like, obviously years like 2020, 21 to check that I've sent it off that year. I started adding the PMI portion just because if they do have it and maybe they don't, list or rebuy or whatever, but you're able to say, hey, maybe you call your mortgage company and ask if you can get this removed, then you look like a hero, because they probably weren't thinking that. So, and then I include the zip code report from RPR just as some more info, but I mail mine. No mums, but I guess I could do some mums too.
That's good. It's all about giving ideas. So, but both of you are using it as a touch point. Again, it's a value add. It's a helpful thing to do. And I'm going to show you how to do it. So I'm going to share my screen again. So everybody knows how to use RealTracks, hopefully. And so here's RealTracks. I think everybody, Andrew, can you see it? See my screen? Okay, gotcha. So we got RealTrax up here. So I've just gone in and I'm done a search here. This is just, you know, in Nashville. I just drew a little area around kind of my neighborhood and a couple of adjoining neighborhoods just to get some boundaries. So the first thing you're going to do is ultimately check most of these things. The software does not calculate coming soons right now. If that becomes something that's valuable, we can do that, but check all of these boxes under status except for coming soon. And then under all of these, go back 1 year, except for the last one. So again, if you're unchecking all, I'm gonna check all those except coming soon. And I'm gonna go back a year. I'm gonna leave the under contract date off because ultimately what that does is that requires the under contract date to be a year back. And if you do that, it basically can miss out on the last 30 days of closings. Now, I know a lot of times if you're doing comps, because you can use this platform to do comps too, you would think, well, Zach, you know, I was learning you were supposed to only go back 6 months. That's fine. You can do that if you want, but it'll make sense in a few minutes why a year is helpful. Ultimately, there's a timeline of kind of when sales and when new listings happen so that you can see when the best time to sell a property would be. So once I do that, the next thing I do is I look at type. You can do everything for this. This is generally a single family neighborhood. I'm just going to do single family homes. But that's it. That's all I limit it to. And some people say, well, hold on. My client only has a 3-bedroom house. What if I don't want to include 4 bedrooms? Well, if you don't do that, they're probably walking down the street and they see a house that's sold. And then you didn't include it in your report. And so it looks like there's missing data. So I like to take a big picture approach. So I'm going to do that. I drew a little map. I've already did that just to save time so you didn't have to watch me draw. And then you search and it comes up with 100 properties, right? So these are all numbered. And the next step that you would typically do if you were running comps, which we're not doing, you'd go to the list and you'd start looking at them and be like, oh, look at that house. And oh, that's not really like the one that I'm doing, or right? We're not going to do that. The idea is to be able to get this done in 5 minutes or less. So all we're going to do is download this data. So to be able to do that, it doesn't matter what tab you're on. We can go back to the map if you want. Just avoid the temptation of going to the list. And if you click more, download right here. So go to more and download. It will download and it'll give you an option here. There's only one change that you have to make, and you'll click Excel. And again, I'm walking through this. I know you're not going to remember exactly what it is, but we're recording this, so you can look back on it and see how to do it. But you just click Excel and then click download. So if you have Excel or numbers on a Mac, you can use this. So I'm going to open that up with Excel. Download it from the internet. Do I trust it? Yes, I trust it. All right, so here's all the data. Now this is a mountain of data. This is every single field that RealTrax has for all 100 of those properties, right? So it's a tremendous amount of data. So please don't send this to your client. They'll freak out. So there's one kind of annoying thing that you have to do here. And that is, I'm going to zoom in just so you can see. In the top left corner, right here, is a little box in both Excel and numbers. If you click that, so everything's highlighted, right? So just click that little box. And then you go, see where the cursor changes between the A and the B. Go in between the A and the B when it changes, and then I'm going to double click that. What that does is that just spaces all the columns out the correct width. It's a little annoying, but that's just a thing that Google Sheets requires you to do. So if for some reason you input this stuff and it doesn't work, that's probably the step that you forgot. The next thing we're going to do is basically copy and paste all of this data in here. Again, one more annoying thing, but it's just the way it translates to Google Sheets is you could also, in theory, select all and copy that. But what that does is that copies thousands and thousands of empty lines, and that will freak out Google and just probably freeze up your computer. So we're going to highlight the one, and you could highlight the one and drag it, drag the selection down if you want. That's one way to do it. You can also highlight the one, scroll down, and then hit Shift, and then highlight row 101. So that has the headers, which are important, and then all the data, the 100 properties, right? So there's 101 lines because there's 100 properties that we saw right here. And then you've got 100 and then a header line. So you have 101 lines. So we're going to copy that. So we're going to click Edit, Copy, or you can do Command C. And then we're going to go back into this little piece of software, the Excel sheet that you'll have soon. And the very first tab is instructions. So you can see written instructions if you want. The second tab is we're going to paste this data. So we have to delete what's there first. So we're going to hit that. Hit delete. So don't delete the lines. You want to hit the delete button on your Mac, or I think it's backspace on your PC. And then you're just going to go to the A1 box, and you can hit edit paste, but Google doesn't let you do that. So they make you hit Control V or Command V. So we'll just hit, once we're in that little spot, Command V. If you start deleting actual rows, it will mess everything up. Don't worry, you can always start over with a fresh one, but it'll take a second, and then you will, you'll have that data. Now this little thing, this little gray bar, you may have seen that for a second, it's still doing it a little bit. If that, you know, depending on how fast your computer is or how much stuff you've got open or whatever, that may take a minute to load everything. But once that's in, everything auto-populates. So all of this data that I'm about to go through all comes from RealTracks and all comes from everything that we just downloaded. So quick recap. All we did was do a search, do a map search. We selected most of those except for coming soons, went a year back except for the last one. I've narrowed it to single family, but you could do single family and condo if you wanted to. I clicked search, and then I clicked more download, right? I checked Excel, I downloaded it, I expanded the widths, and then I just pasted it in. Make sense? So pretty easy so far. So the, what is all this stuff, right? So the idea behind this was, if you're trying to show somebody everything in RealTracks, right? We might be used to showing them a CMA. If I select all, right? So this is kind of the language that we're used to seeing, right? A CMA, and it's, uh-oh, I don't know where that went. Right, it's a CMA, and it's just lots and lots of, you know, stuff, and it's data and numbers and letters and streets, but a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So showing is better than telling. If you can show somebody what it looks like in a visual way, I think that's much more effective. That's the way my brain works. So if it's helpful to you as well, great. So ultimately, you can change this and say, let's say I was, you know, sending this to Lee Fund as a you know, person, and his address was 123 Main Street. I might say, Dear Lee, so you can change this, but it just has some pre-written language, and you can print this out like a letter. We hope this finds you well and closes your annual real estate review for your home to give you an overview of the real estate market in your area during the last 12 months. We provide this as a service to past clients and friends, so if you have any questions about the following, don't hesitate to let us know, and we can talk by phone or meet in person. There's 3 bullet points here because most people won't read that. They'll read the bullet points, the data and graphs contained in this report, right? And then they'll go back and they'll glance about what those are referencing. There's also a PS. Let us know if you have any friends or neighbors who could use our expertise. We're always appreciative. Most people read bullet points, and most people read a PS, and they skip what's in between. But then they also will glance at these. So you know, I made this from Hunter, so you could say from, you know, Zach Goodyear at Village. Great, right? And so you'll be able to print that off, have it as a letter. You're always using the file menu in here, so file, print, and then boom. It's a letter, it has all these definitions down below, but the letter's on the front page. So pretty simple. If for some reason y'all need me to stop, just unmute yourself, and because I can't see I don't have your pictures up right now. All right, so what are these things? So total for sale. So we call those what? What do we call those? Actives, right? So we call them active listings. Active doesn't really mean anything to the consumer. They think a property is for sale, right? So a property is either, in a consumer's mind, it's either for sale, it's pending, or it's closed or sold, or it didn't sell, right? So we call didn't sell expireds and withdrawns. But expireds, what do you mean expireds? Well, expired from our MLS, it's yada yada. Consumer doesn't care about that. They think what makes sense to them is the language not sold. So what this does is it basically, it adds everything up. So it adds up all the expires and all the withdrawals and puts them into one category called not sold. And so you might wonder, well, why does that matter? Well, most of your neighbors, if they see, or your past clients, if they see a sign go in the yard, sit there for 3 months, and then they see it go out of the yard, what do they think? They think it's sold, right? That's just the common assumption, but it may not have. And that's a pretty good indicator. If it didn't sell, that maybe there's a reason, right? Price, condition, location. Those are the three things that determine value. And so if it didn't sell, then one of those things was out of whack. And what we'll be able to do here is, in a minute, you'll see some data that visually interprets all that RealTrax data, puts it in some pictures, and gives you a really easy way to see what's out of whack. So 3 that are pending. So if you look at here, you've got some stats. Let's see, we've got, how many did it say we had? We had 10 for sale. Oh, yep, active 10 listings, so that matches up. 3 pending. Let's see, there's 2 under contract not showing, and then 1 under contract showing. All right, so 2 plus 1 is 3, so that's correct. 62 have closed. Yep, boom. So it's the same data that's here in RealTrax. It's just tallying it up. 25 not sold, so that's probably gonna, let's see, expired 2 and withdrawn 23. So 2 plus 23 is 25, so puts it all together. Average days in the market, that's the average days in the market of everything. That just conglomerates it and shows it. That the average days in the market, that's active, pendings, closed, everything, just to kind of group it all in, 63 days. The average original list price to sale price ratio of the closed listings is 98.4%. So there's list price to sale price ratio. So if you start out at $1 million and you go to $900,000 and then you drop it to $800,000 and you sell it at $700,000, then your original list price was $1 million and your sale price was 700. So your list price to sale price ratio, original list price to sale price ratio would be 70%, right? So that doesn't take into consideration if somebody pulled it off the market and put it back on, but for that MLS number, it's the original list price to sale price ratio is 98.4%. Months of absorption. So that's how many homes in that particular neighborhood sold in any given month. So that's just simply taking 62 divided by 12. 62 divided by 12 is 5.2 per month. So an average of 5.2 homes sell per month. So if there's 10 choices and historically about 5 sell per month, then you've got about almost 2 months of supply, right? The average sold price per square foot, 320 bucks. And the odds of selling, this can be a little bit confusing. This was a ninja term, but the odds of selling, this is really just to give your sellers kind of a question and probably, hopefully make them call you or ask you a question. It's designed to be just a little bit confusing. The odds of selling is simply the closed sales, the things that actually were proven to sell, divided by everything. So 62 divided by 10 plus 3 plus 62 plus 25. And that gives you 65%. And so ultimately, the 25 that didn't sell, they had a chance to sell. The 3 that are pending, they haven't sold yet. And the 10 that are for sale also haven't sold yet. They haven't closed yet. So none of those have proven to be closed sales. And so the odds of selling right now in this particular neighborhood is 65%. Does that mean that you only have a 65% shot of selling your house? No, not necessarily if you're priced, conditioned, and located appropriately. Everybody with me? So ultimately, this gives you a little bit of a letter. There's another tab in here that's the exact same thing, exact same data. You can just change the name. I call it relevant property statistics, but it's basically a visual CMA. It skips the letter portion. So if you just wanted to use this for some actual comps, in which case you would narrow it down and just like you would on RealTrax, you can do it that way. So, and again, I'm kind of talking about this from a real estate review standpoint, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether you use that as a real estate review or as a visual CMA. So this is the coolest part right here. And this is the kind of the heartbeat of the graph, is this scatter chart. So what this does is this takes all of the sales and plots them on a graph, all of the for sale properties, all of the pendings, and all of the ones that did not sell, and it plots everything on a graph. And so the for sale properties are in blue dots, those blue dots are here. You can see that was, it doesn't show the address, but that sold, you know, that's 2,500 square feet, and it sold for, that one sold for $1,076,000. Another one at 2,582 square feet sold for $1,635,000. That one is on the market. There's actually two in the market of that exact same size range. This one is on the market here for almost 6,000 square feet. It's listed at 2.1 million and change, right? The X's are ones that did not sell. So if you look here, this is kind of interesting. If you look at that, 5710 square feet, that's probably the same property. I don't know exactly, but that's probably the same property. But I really don't care at this point because I'm not going to dig in and waste time doing that. I'm just trying to be efficient and get this out. It's just a market overview. But that's really helpful when you're using this for comps and you have narrowed it down. For sale, it shows at $1,950,000, but it did not sell at $1,990,000. So it was withdrawn, pulled off the market, relisted, started as a new days on market. So what's really cool is this blue line is an average of all these blue dots. So you can use that blue line and say, okay, well, that's the average market. That's the, you know, that is the market price at any given size range. So 4,000 square feet in this particular neighborhood, the average market price is just a little bit above $1,250,000, right? At 2,000 square feet, the average market price is about $650,000. So anything that is above the line is above the average market price. Anything that's below the line is below the average market price. And here you don't see it as much, but a lot of times, especially if you're running comps, and this is why I always like to include expireds and withdrawns in the comps, is a lot of times you see a lot of the red X's way above the line. And so it's obvious what didn't work. It was a price issue. And so you can show your sellers and say, hey, here's why it didn't sell. I don't even care what yes, you can look at the actual property and compare it, but it doesn't even matter. You know that that's overpriced. I can tell you right now that this property, I will almost guarantee you that property is not going to sell at $1,595,000 because it's way above the line. Now, in fairness, there is one that was a little bit smaller that did sell at $1,635,000. So I could be wrong, but statistically, most of the stuff is right down here by the line. Does that make sense? Some head nods. Any questions about that? And Lee and Andrea chime in if I'm missing something.
Zach, do you send every chart or do you just pick the ones that you like best?
So it's a great question. I just pick the ones that I like the best. I don't send every single one. I think, you know, there comes a point where too much is too much and you're kind of, you know, the idea is I mentioned that point about the odds of selling to create just a hint of confusion. But if you truly do confuse the hell out of somebody, then it's probably not, you know, you're not doing yourself any favors. And that's one of I love RPR, but that's one of the things that I don't like about RPR is the reports are so much that it's like you give somebody that and you're almost trying to make yourself look smart. But then, I mean, I look at those things and my eyes glaze over. So this is this one graph is the heartbeat of, at least when you're doing comps, this is a really valuable tool. But again, it's a cool tool for real estate review as well.
I want to piggyback on that, Zach.
Yep.
Do not send a graph if you don't know how to explain it.
Great point. And again, the whole point of the graph, of any graph, is to be able to tell a story. The whole point of data is to be able to tell a story. So if you're not able to tell the story behind that, then don't worry about it. But ultimately, you can go back to Real Tracks and you can say, all right, well, what was that house that did not sell at, look, the same square footage, so 5,300 square feet. Maybe that's the same one, maybe not, but $1,895,000, and nah, that's probably two different properties. But this one, let's see what this one is at $1,635,000. We could just go back here, look at the list, and scroll down and say, all right, it was a closed listing at $1,635,000. This one, all right, 3718 West End Avenue. Okay, all right, that makes sense. It's an historic house right on, gosh, 2 beds, 2 baths. That's crazy. So historic house right on West End Avenue. Prime development property with the possibility of building as many as 18 units. Bingo, there's your answer. That's the story. And that is exactly why that property sold for so much. So there is, this tool does include a list with it. So again, you don't have to use all these, but if it's helpful, great. Price per square foot. Consumers love talking about price per square foot. That drives me nuts because they think they can just know everything by price per square foot. But as you and I all know, different square footages, some people might have a $150,000 pool and backyard area that isn't square footage, but it obviously adds a lot of value to the home. So this shows you year built down here, and you can see just kind of historically of the closings that have happened, what is selling. Well, there's a lot of stuff that was built in 1940 and earlier, and then there's a whole chunk of stuff that was built in the last couple of years that is selling as well. So those are the kind of the hot areas. For areas like in Nashville, even this neighborhood, so this is primarily an historic neighborhood, or Germantown, where you have a lot of historic homes and then also a lot of newer homes. If you're running comps, typically you might say, well, I don't want to run comps on historic homes if I'm selling a new house. But buyers are probably going to be looking at new houses, right? I mean, if it's a cool house in a good location, they're probably going to look at it. So look at that stuff, look at that data and see, hey, just out of curiosity, are historic homes a little bit more valuable? Do they sell for more on a per square foot basis than new homes? Or what did I say? Do new homes sell for more than historic homes, or vice versa? So this can give you that information. So if you look at that trend line here, you see it trends up just a little bit. So it's not too much of a difference, but the average this here says that the new homes are selling for a little bit more on a per square foot basis historically than the historic homes. And that's not always the case, right? Sold price versus days on market. This can be helpful if you're looking at, hey, how many days on the market how long do homes stay on the market in your neighborhood, right? Well, we saw over here that it was 63, but if you look at the sold price, you can see that most of these homes sell probably within about 50 days, right? Most of them sell within about 30 days. That's the majority of them. But the more expensive, as this trend line goes up, the more expensive houses, with the exception of a few, the more expensive houses tend to stay on the market longer. That's probably makes sense. If you've got somebody who is an engineer or they like data and they want to see the numbers behind the facts, I think this is good to include for everything. You can basically print out a list of all the data that this pulls from, right? Again, if you see something in here that you don't like, one thing that you need to not do is don't delete a line out of here, because it'll mess up the sheet. So you have to go back and just take it out of the RealTrax search and then re-download it. But that's a list of everything. Activity by month. So this is why I do it for a year. So if you look at, what are we, the last day of March right now. So right here, you see the green line is the number of new listings. So new listings peaked in what month? In May. You probably all said that. You're just on mute. So new listings peaked out in May. They bottomed out, oddly enough, in July. That was the fewest number of new listings. So if you're meeting with a seller, or if a seller looks at this and says, I wonder when the best time to sell a house is. Well, if I was thinking about putting something on the market in April versus May, I'd look at this and say, you know what, I'm going to beat the crowd. If last year is an indicator of what this year is going to be like, then I'm going to do it sooner rather than later so that I don't get flooded with competition in May, right? So this shows the number of closings each month. So March looks at March of this year, but because we're on the 31st of March, April is actually April of 2019, May of 2019. So February was the most recent February. Basically everything's the most recent month. So April was the most recent April, which is, we can't look into the future. But hopefully that makes sense. I don't know why that says previous 6 months. That should say previous 12 months. Every now and then I'll find a mistake in here. This is man-made by a human who doesn't know how to do stuff perfectly like this. So, but hopefully it's helpful. All right, so here, this is activity by price range and status. Hey, where are most of the houses in my neighborhood selling? Well, they're kind of across the board. If you look in, these are tiny, but these are in $25,000 increments. And because there's so many, because we have such a wide spread of homes, they look at the data, the little markers actually skip over and combines some. That's why it says 700 to 725 and then jumps from 750 to 775. The 725 to 750 is there. It's just the graph had to be small enough so it doesn't show up. But the least expensive option is in the 725 to 750 range. And there's two options that are in the 2,075,000 to 2.2 million range. That's kind of interesting. Pendings, expireds. What's really interesting to me is where the solds are. And so if you're looking, that sold range is 1,075,000 to 1.1. So if you've got a seller who's thinking, man, I really want to be over 1.1, you can look at that and say, okay, but in the last year, 5 homes sold from 1,075,000 to 1.1 million, and only 2 sold from 1.1 to 1,025,000. So I think we need to get under that 1.1 mark and go to where the data shows that that's the most popular spot, right? So hopefully that's helpful. This is similar, but, and this really doesn't, I would never include this in a real estate review, but this graph doesn't look as nutty when you're looking at pretty, let's say you're looking at, pretty good comp data with a, $50,000 or $100,000 spread. It shows you in $5,000 price increments, the same thing. So maybe, $785,000 works a whole lot better than $775,000, or maybe it works better than $780 or $795 or $794. So hopefully that's helpful. But again, this is more for using it for comps. And I'll try to do a quick overview of how to use it with comps too in a minute once we get through it. The pendings and the solds. So this is just looking at pendings and sales. So the closed sales, the sold properties are the prices that they sold at. So that's sold for between 725 and 750. And then the pending is, since we don't know the sale price, it's just the list price. But it just basically stacks them on top of each other and tries to look at, hey, maybe there's 5 closings here, but maybe there's 2 closings here and 8 pendings. So maybe your seller is right. Maybe there is a shot at doing that. And again, I've got explanations on all these graphs on the front page, so you can see that. If you've got somebody who doesn't like pictures, but they like numbers, this is the exact same information, and it just looks at, it's all kind of, heat maps. So it's the darker reds are the heavier ones, right? And then so the sold ones are right here. So remember that 5,075,000 to 1.1. So it shows 5 are sold. If you add it up, there's 0 pendings, but if you added those up, you've got 2 of those, or 5 of those as well. So just looks at it in a different way. And then this is really confusing. I would not include this in a real estate review, but this is a helpful tool to use if you're working with a new construction builder, for instance, and you're trying to, again, narrow down graphically, and it's the same exact data, just looking at actives versus pending and sold. So you're saying, all right, where is the proven track record of sales and pendings? And so maybe they're, at this side of the page, let's say this was compressed and call it, $750,000 range. That's where most of the sales are, but you've got a builder saying, hey, I think we need to sell some houses in the 825 range. Well, maybe there's a big green spike in the 815 to 825 range. So that's where all the competition is, but all the sales are actually happening $50,000 less. So it's a great opportunity to be able to have a conversation with your developer and show them hard data in a quick, easy to read format, which again, this particular one is not, because that's not really useful for this tool, but you can use the same tool by inputting the data. Look at a bunch of new construction homes in your market and see where they're selling, and just dump it in the sheet. And you can show the developer, hey, I think we need to be about $50,000 less. We're going to get stuck with all the competition and very little is selling right there. But if we're $50,000 less, then we can kind of be where there's little competition, but there's a lot more action here. And so this is opportunity, and this is sort of that's a risky area, right? I don't know if y'all, Lee or Andrew, if y'all have used that at all, but that's a helpful tool when working with builders to look at new properties especially. And then that's pretty much it. So that shows everything that is kind of what this does. So let me just unshare that. Well, I'll leave the screen shared for a minute, but I'll pull everybody up. What question? I'm sure somebody has some question or there's some confusion on what I just talked about, because I just talked a lot. Sorry. Unmute yourself if you have a question.
Hey, Zach, I have a question. It's
Hey,
Maggie.
Hey.
Hi. Can you go back to this first screen that was super visual with the vertical bar graphs?
The first screen with the vertical bar graphs, was
Yeah,
that
no. Yes, sorry.
the one with the little
I don't even know
boxes?
what I'm talking about. Average, I can't read that. Average CLP, what is CLP?
So that's OLP. So that's, and again, you got all the definitions down here. So original list price to sold price ratio. So that's the OLP is original list price.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Got a couple chats,
Well,
I think.
Question, Zach.
Yeah.
In the tab that had basically just row by row all the information in it, and you said don't delete any of the rows, you go back to the real tracks and just uncheck the box that you want to make that row go away. Can you just hide it and then maybe hide the number rows so it doesn't look like there's something missing? Does that mess up anything?
You could, but basically what's cool about this is these numbers actually equate to on your real tracks. So 1 is 127 Brighton Court, 2 is 201 Mockingbird. If we go back to the real tracks page, and I go to one is Brighton Close, 2 is Mockingbird. So if you did a screenshot of this map, annoyingly, if you try to, because there is a map tool, but you could say, I want to print the map. RealTrack says, oh, so sorry, there's a limit of 30. So that drives me nuts, but whatever. If you want to give RealTracks feedback on that, you can write feedback@realtracks.com, and for more people to do that, they might change that. But ultimately, you can do a screenshot on a Mac. It's Shift Command 4, and just take a picture of that, and then it'll show up right here, and then you can drop it in your downloads folder. But wherever, like number 2, that's Mockingbird, right? So I always include a screenshot of a map. That's something I do every single time. And where's my list here? So number 2, it references those numbers.
I have a question again.
Yeah.
I need to do one of these. I have a call with some clients at 3 who have a house here in Hillwood that they would like to sell. And so is there a phone a friend platform here I can call if I have problems? Because I need to do this around 1 o'clock and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'd practice it. So I practice it. And so let me go through just a quick kind of how-to, right? I'll tell you what, let me do.
Maggie, why don't you call me after, and I'll do a one-on-one with you.
Okay, awesome. I've got another call, but can I call you around 1?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll text you. Okay, thank you.
So let's, for a minute, we're just gonna, instead of a real estate review, we're gonna run some comps. I'll show you how to do that just so we can kind of run through this one more time and show you how to do it. So I'm gonna just stick with the same area, but let's say we are comping a house that is, I don't know, 3,000 square feet. I'm just making that up. All right, so let's say we're comping a house at 3,000 square feet. So I'm gonna do the same map, same neighborhoods, but let's say I don't really wanna include new construction stuff. So it's an historic home. So I'm gonna say anything built, before 1950 here. So I wouldn't do this with a real estate review, but I would with a CMA. And so this is how I do every single CMA. I don't use I just like it better, and it actually, it's just a lot easier for me. So I'm looking at these 3 neighborhoods. So this is Richland West End, this is Cherokee Park, this is Whitland. Those are all fairly similar. And so let's say I only care about site-built properties, and I'm going to say, what did I say? It needs to be at least 3 bedrooms, and it needs to be, let's say, 2,500 to 3,500 square feet. Let's just see what happens there. I'm going to leave all this stuff the same. I'm going to go back a year. So I got 24 properties. All right. So you got 1 active, 1 under contract, some closed, and some withdrawals. So let's pretend for a minute that we've gone through these and I've looked at all of them and said, yes, they're all pretty valuable comps. What do we do next? We click. We can select all if you want. Like, so if you didn't want to select all, you could say, oh, I don't want that one, and I don't want that one. And then you could, narrow those, only show the checked ones. But for right now, let's just do them all. So I'm going to select download. Instead of all, because I started selecting some, it just defaults to that. Click Excel, and then I open that up, and then I have to click that box, double click that, and then I click there, Shift, there, Command C or Edit Copy, and I'm going to go into here. And again, you'll have this link here soon, and I'll show you how to do it. I'm going to scroll over to where it says Paste Raw Data here. I'm going to select all and hit the Delete button on a Mac, or the backspace button. I think it's a backspace button on a PC. I'm going to click on a Mac, Command V, once I'm in the A1 cell. So now we're looking at 24 properties, right? So I'm running some comps. I want to show these to somebody, right? So let's say, 1 property for sale, 1 pending, there's 13 sold and 9 that didn't sell. Because of those 9 that didn't sell, the odds of selling drops pretty substantially, right? If that's annoying to you, delete it. If you don't want it there, just skim over it. But it does have an explanation of what that is down here, if you want to see. Average sold price per foot is $284. About 1 sale, there's 13 sales in the last 12 months, right? If you do this for 6 months, you have to change that to 6, right? Because then that will mess with that number. But I assume that everybody's doing it for 12 months. Just get a little bit bigger picture. And then here, so we were just looking here. So I'm going to scroll over. And on this scatter chart, so this is kind of helpful, right? So you have a couple things here that didn't sell. That was, $1,150,000, $1,125,000, and then $899 for 3,328 square feet. I am curious, is that the same property? So withdrawn. Yeah, wow, look at that. Look at that. 3805 Roland Road, listed at $1,150,000, then $1,125,000, then it dropped down to $899 and still didn't sell. Wow. Okay. That's not ideal. So I'd glance at that, right? You could see that in here, but that was a super quick way to just be able to see that, right? This property didn't sell either. So some of these, sometimes I'll look at this and be like, huh, that's way below the line. Why did that not sell? Well, it was listed for $675, or it was listed for almost $715, and then was pulled off the market, and then eventually sold for $675. Okay, that's helpful. I bet that's the same property. 3,116 square feet. I'm kind of glance at your, where's the sales here? What did it sell for? 675. Too many windows open. Where was it? Right here. 675. Right here. So 205 Cherokee Road, okay. Was 205 Cherokee Road, I think, yep, same one. So it was listed, when it was pulled off the market, it was at 714. But if you look at the history, I bet it was they probably dropped some prices here, right? So it started out at 720, they dropped the price a little over $5,000, pulled it off the market, put it back on the market, maybe with a different agent, maybe with the same one, I'm not sure. I don't really care right now. It eventually sold. Right? So you can look at this. A lot of times I'll kind of narrow down comps just loosely in RealTrax, and then I'll just upload them into here and be like, huh, that's an outlier. That's way above the line. What is that and what makes it great? Well, maybe it was a house on 2 lots, or maybe it was a development opportunity, or Who knows, right? So there's, again, the data is important when you have the story behind it. So I'm going to just make a mental note or write out to the side what that property is. So when they ask, I can explain it, or maybe I just don't include it, right? So if I don't include that blue trend line is going to go down just a little bit because that's helped pulling it up. But this property, just looking at this, well, let's see what that is. Let's see what that 2938 one is. 2938 sold for $1.1 million. So if I just scroll down here and look at the closed sales for $1.1 million. All right, so 3704 Whitland. Okay, so that's on Whitland Avenue, super prime street. No days on market. Looks like it was a pre-sale. There's only one photo. So I'm probably going to main floor renovation 2012. So it looks like it was fully renovated. Maybe that's just not a good comp for my house, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and then uncheck that here. Click more, download, do the exact same thing, click Excel. Once you get used to it, it takes just a second. Open it up, and then again, just do that, double click it. There, Shift, Command C. I wish RealTrax had something like this built into it. It'd be awesome, but they don't. And I've sent this thing to them and asked them, hey, can you put something in here? So select all, hit the delete button, and then go to the A1 cell, Command V, and paste. So maybe that takes 60 seconds to do all over again. But what that does is that took that out, right? So now the line is makes a little bit more sense. And so I can say, all right, that's our one competing property. Just, would you argue that if you were deciding that was a sellable property or not, is that property priced appropriately? What do you think? Yes or no? Few people are chatting. Good talk, people. I love you all. That property is not priced appropriately, right? The other sales, that sold for $780 and that sold for $875. Now again, we can look into it and understand it, and ideally I'd love to preview it before, like doing a full presentation with this to my sellers, but preview it online, go look at the pictures, try to understand what made it better, call the listing agent and say, hey, how's your showings going? Well, we haven't had any. Oh, okay. So if your seller says, hey, I'm thinking there's one in the market that's $950, I think we should be $952 because we're about, 2,800 square feet or whatever. Well, you probably shouldn't be because that's way above the line, right? That's way above that average line. So just a great tool to visually show somebody what that looks like. Price per foot versus year built. Again, this is not really that helpful when running comps because ideally you're kind of looking at, similar years, sales price first days on market. I hardly ever use this. Some people, I'll leave it in there for anybody that wants it, but map selection. So in order to do this, just a quick tip, and these are all in the, I have a little how-to video linked on here if you want to watch that again, and then I've got written instructions. But if you just select that, hit Shift and select that, and then click File, Print. That's the file, the Google file menu. And you click Print Selected Cells. If you don't do that, it will print page after page after page, like 100 pages of gray lines. So don't do that. If you just click Selected Cells and click Print, it'll put a little PDF on your computer. And so, and I have little notes, little reminders where it says Print Selection and Landscape to do that. You can link the activities by month. So no sales in January or February, but there's sales happening in March. Hey, new listings peak out in May. They peaked out in January and they peaked out this January, and they also peaked out last May. There were 4 new listings. So if I'm a seller, I'm going to want to get the property on the market in April. Great way to just kind of bump it up. All right. There's really no story to tell here. What if we look in the 5,000 price range? So, if you're thinking of, it kind of just lines everything up, right? So again, not a huge story to tell, but if you're looking at a pretty tight price range, you might see a big spike in a certain price range here. And then you can you know, that's proof that that's a popular range. So if your seller is thinking $10,000, even $10,000 or $15,000 above that, you control the process, they control the decision. But if you can show them that and say, hey, there were only, let's say this was, you know, 2 sales in the 835 range, but there were 8 sales in the 825 range, that's pretty compelling. I'd want to be where, if I'm trying to sell my house, I'm going to go where the sales are happening. That's where I'd like to be. And they say, well, we can price it there. Somebody might, you know, we could price it at 835 and somebody could, you know, pay 825 for it. Maybe you look back at that little thing here and say, all right, it's 97.6. So we say 835 times, you know, 97.6%. That's 814. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. 835, 840, somewhere in there. I don't have the coronavirus. I don't think. Hopefully not. Shouldn't joke about that right now, I guess. All right, activity by month. We talked about that. Price range. Pendings and solds. Again, this just, you know, looks at both pendings and solds to see if there's any. There's really nothing very valuable in these here. Price range table. This is filling in, or as I'm scrolling up. Again, none of that is really that valuable, and this is not that valuable. So really the only thing that I would use, probably the only thing that I would use, and what I use 90% of the time when I'm running comps, is this graph. This is the most important and most valuable one. Everything else is just some fluff. Is that helpful? Maggie, I don't know if that gave you a little insight on how to do it.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay. So again, play with it. When I'm doing these on an actual like CMA, if I'm comping something, I'll go back and forth 5, 6 times. You know, I like to have the data make sense. I like to have the data. I'm not trying to leave stuff out, but sometimes this can, you know, if there's a blue spike way up there, like that looks so out of whack. I know that my seller's going to ask about it because I'm asking about it. So I'm going to go see what it is. Oh, it was a property that was a development opportunity for 18 lots. Okay, that has nothing to do with my comp, and I missed that when I was going through it in RealTrax. So I'm going to go back into RealTrax, uncheck it, re-download it, put it in. Make sense? All right, so when you get this, I'm going to send out a link, and here's what you'll need to do. You're going to get this link, and it will open up probably, I don't know, on this page maybe, and you're going to have to make a copy. You're not going to be able to edit that link that I send you. So if you click File, you have to be logged into your Google account and click File, Make a Copy. There's probably also an option that says Add to my drive. Do not hit Add to my drive. It's tempting, but that's one of the main reasons that people can't make it work. Because if it adds to your drive, then basically all of my things that I've got locked down in here so people don't accidentally mess up the original, it won't let you do it. But if you click File, not in this one, because you don't see File, Make a Copy here, but in the Google File menu, File, Make a Copy, it'll pop up and say, hey, what do you want it to be called? And you could say, you know, Real Estate Review for Maggie Bond, right? Don't worry about that. If you want to put it in a folder or whatever. So I'll click that. And then it'll open up at a new tab. So that was the one that I was just in. And basically everything will copy over, but onto your own thing, your own Google Drive. And so you can find it by going to drive.google.com. And again, if you wanted to put it in a certain folder or whatever, feel free to do that. But should be at the top of your list on drive.google.com if you sort by most recent. And you can paste the data here. For these things, just be sure before you send out a letter to change it from my name to your name. And so if you're doing that, you can click Maggie Bond. If for some reason you're like, oh no, I just deleted that, just hit Command Z and undo everything. Super simple. You really can't break this. And if you keep the original link, then if you do break this, and let's say you just like sneezed and deleted all that stuff and have no idea how to get it back, and you forgot about Command Z, you can always go back to that original link and say File, Make a Copy, and do it again. Some people like to save one for every, like file, make a copy for every single client that they do it for. I don't do that. I will usually just save it as a PDF. So that's how you get into it. Once you're into it, again, change the names to your name on both of these things. Actually, it's really just the letter that's important. And then you can input your client's name here. And then everything else just happens automatically. Again, you should never have to mess with any of this. So there's one other, there's three main areas that cause people problems. One is when they're copying it, they forget to do file, make a copy. The other one is when they're doing Excel, they forget to do this. And for whatever reason, there's a little glitch with Google where if this thing right here, for instance, shows these, then it's those little hashtags that actually get copied over. So you just have to expand that. And then the third reason that people mess up is every now and then somebody will input a listing as $1, and then a few minutes later they'll change it to 699,000. Well, that makes the original list price of $1 to sale price ratio like infinity. And so you'll have this crazy huge number right here that says 96,000%. So if that happens, give me a call and I can walk you through it, but I won't get into that right now. But those are the main things that cause problems. If you want to, and then the only other thing that if you want to print this out, I would love it if there was like one print button that would print everything. I haven't figured out how to do that. If anybody knows how to do that, let me know and I can add that tool. But right now, it should be set up to print the way that that prints in vertical format. So you just click next and then it'll save it, right? So it just saves that letter. If you click that and you click file, print, it should just save it as a landscape, right? So print, but now you have two different PDFs, a little annoying, so you can combine them if you want, and if you want to combine them, just the way to do that is, if those don't show up over there, just click view thumbnails right here. And then you can take that one and click view thumbnail. And then and this is on a Mac, I'm not sure how to do it on a PC. You just kind of hold that and drag it over there. Right? Makes sense. So there's probably 100 YouTube videos on how to do that if you need to learn how to do that. And then the only ones that, again, if you want to print this one, you just have to select. So you're just selecting all of that, right? And all I did was click that, hit the shift key, go down here, and then click again. Highlights that, I click file in the Google file menu, print, and selected cells. And that way it only does those. Next, done. You with me? So that's pretty much it. So if you can do that, feel free, I'll send out the link here in a minute. If you have problems, you can give me, Andrea, or Lee a call. I'll put our contact info on there. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome, thank you.
Any questions? I know that was a lot. It feels like a lot. You're not going to break it. You just got to practice. And if this is completely overwhelming, then don't use it. You don't have to. Again, there are a lot of ways that the whole point of a real estate review is to get in touch with your client. So this is just one way to do it. I actually use this more for comps. I built it with the intent of using it for real estate reviews. I use this every single time I'm doing a CMA. And then I'll use it for, here and there for real estate reviews. Scott Saunders, you got anything? You're just at the top of my screen, so. All right, well, that's all I got. Bunch of chat boxes here. So yeah, good to see everybody. This is fun. I don't know how many people we had on here, but looks like quite a few. So this will be recorded. I'll put this on the YouTube channel as well, and I'll send out a link. So if you want to be able to, you know, look back on it, you can. And then, and that's helpful just to be able to kind of go back and forth through what it is. And then I will email out the link to be able to use. I'm just going to double check that a couple things are working correctly. And then if you find something that's not working correctly, this is probably like the, you know, 25th version of this thing over the last few years. So, and then inevitably every now and then RealTrax changes their formatting or their labels for something, and then it messes everything up. So I'll probably create a little link to always have the latest version of there, but don't hesitate to call me or Andrea or Lee if you have any questions. But thanks, y'all. Take care.